Before we begin, we'd like to say thank you to the supporter of this episode, Brewin Dolphin. Brewin Dolphin are a leading investment management and financial advice firm working closely with the business community in the Northeast. They specialise in assisting business owners and entrepreneurs to grow, protect, and make the most of their personal wealth, as well as advising on taxation, company exits, and other fundamental business issues. To find out more, visit www.brewindolphin.co.uk or call the Newcastle office on 0191 279 7300. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Talking Future, a podcast by the Entrepreneurs Forum where we talk to Northeast entrepreneurs about their work, their lives and especially their views on the future and how they're innovating as they plan ahead. I'm Yvonne Bell, and today I'm talking to Brian Palmer, CEO of Tharsus. As CEO, Brian has grown Tharsus from a small backstreet metal bashing shop to one of Europe's leading advanced machine and robotics businesses, working in close collaboration with customers to deliver market-disrupting products. One of their most recent inventions includes Bump, a social distancing technology which uses radio frequency to alert wearers when they're too close to another person. Developed in only 8 weeks, Bump has been praised by many national news outlets for helping workplaces navigate COVID workplace measures and was presented with the President's Special Award for Pandemic Service by the Royal Academy of Engineering. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Yvonne.
So, Brian, can you just start by giving us a little bit of career background? Tell us where you've come from, what the early days of setting up the business were.
So, Newcastle born and bred, and went off down to Manchester to study engineering and returned to the Northeast in '88 as a part of the first graduate intake with Nissan.
All right.
So Nissan at the point was about 1,500 colleagues. Mm-hmm. So spent 5 years with Nissan, which was absolutely fantastic in the early days because everything we did was new. When I joined, we built right-hand drive Bluebird. First launch was left-hand drive Bluebird, then Primera, then Micra. So it was a really exciting period when Nissan was changing dramatically. So learned a lot and had a lot of fun. Beyond that, left Nissan at the end of '93 to go and be a ski bum. So spent 2 very happy winters in the Alps, free skiing 6 days a week, and a summer in South America, or another winter in South America as it was. And came back to the UK, determined to do something different, and ended up at Ford because people generally sort of pigeonhole folk as, you've got a lot of automotive experience, so I would go into any car company, but I didn't want to be part of a big multinational, with hundreds of thousands of people. But anyway, I ended up at Ford because that's where I could get a job. And then I ended up coming back to the Northeast in '97 to help my father sort of actually sell sort of his business. And as part of that, I got £100,000 from out of the shares that he'd put in my name many years earlier. And that was my, shall we say, stake money that has become Tharsus today.
Yeah, and I suppose he took a chance on his son having that sort of money, but you did all right with it, didn't you? You did the right thing.
Looking back, yes, I suspect there was some times in those early years where you'd probably questions asked and head was probably held in hands. But we clearly it was a good investment when you look back.
So, I mean, why did you think, right, I've got some money, I'm going to buy a company called Tharsus? Was it called Tharsus then?
It was called the Tharsus Welding and Sheet Metal Work Company Limited, operating out of Back Glen Street. So it was a proper backstreet metal basher. Uh-huh. The accounts were done on a contometer, which the younger listeners will probably have to research, but that's the device that predates a calculator. And it had one numerical readout on a milling machine. But what it did have, had a really quite an interesting customer base. So people like BT, Fire Systems, which are quite successful in Tyneside, GPT, which became Marconi. So it was an interesting customer base, which unfortunately, as the tech crash of 2001 turned out to be a who's who of corporate disaster. But that's another story.
Right. Uh-huh. And I mean, for those listening to the podcast, they wouldn't know that every telephone exchange in the UK has a Tharsus product in it. I mean, that's for a little backstreet basher, that's not bad, is it?
So I think the story there is I went into Tharsus with a partner. That was fine for the first few years, but then we hit the sort of tech crash of 2001, and a lot of our customers really, when people like Marconi went from £12 to 12 pence sort of share value. So we really, Via Systems went bust, so who are our biggest customer. So it really was a tough few years. So at that point, the partnership really wasn't working, so we decided to go our separate ways, and I ended up with the business, which I wasn't sure if that was the right thing or not, because I did have plan B of heading back to the Alps. But then we had a part of that, we did have a business advisor, a guy called David Lane, and he was the man who inspired me to change from being an owner manager into an entrepreneur. And we grew strongly as the broadband rollout in the UK took pace in the sort of mid-2000s, so 2005, 2004, 5, the business started to grow again. And it was David who helped me make some really quite big, bold decisions. And as a result of that, we set up a second business. And for the broadband rollout, 2006 through to 8, 9, Tharsus supplied probably 95% of all of the cable management and the infrastructure around cables coming in and out of telephone exchanges for the UK. And we dominated that market. BT didn't particularly like it, but we're so good at what we're doing, they couldn't do anything about it. So
that was a big risk for you, though, because if you say they were at a risk of having you as their big supplier, but also vice versa. Is that how you felt? I mean, did you feel like you were sticking your neck out?
Well, yes, probably more. So, I mean, at that point in time, we were probably just over £1 million a year business, probably 1.5 million revenue. I went out to see somebody in London, one of the big telephone exchanges, and through a conversation with the owner, the technical owner of all of the overhead ironwork, as it's called in the telephone exchanges, I realised he didn't actually understand what he's talking about. And there was a contractor that they'd given the task of putting the first 21st century network infrastructure into this central London exchange. And the BT guy was just kept on referring to a drawing number, but he couldn't tell the contractor where to get the drawing or what was on it. And they were moving from a central procurement function where we were supplying components into the central wet stores, and it was all direct labour. So product then came out of this BT central stores, the BT installers, and were moving to sell it to just contracting people like Talents and Fujitsu's and large installation type businesses. There's the drawings, price and install that for us, please. So we took a risk because there was nobody who could supply all of the product. We spent over £100,000, maybe about £150,000 on product that we didn't manufacture, so that we had all of the materials that were required. We also created modern 3D CAD drawings of the drawing, which is RP 16950, which I still remember. And we then modernized it. So because it was fibre, and we basically then, with agreement with folk in BT, we added to the metalwork sort of design in order to accommodate fibre and DC power in the way it was needed for the broadband rollout. So we took a huge risk. So we invested £150,000 on product that we may or may not sell. But that gave us that starting point in what became that dominant position.
Yeah. And at all time, did you have faith or did you have doubt? Because, if you didn't have faith that it was going to work, you've made a big risk there, haven't you?
It was 15 years ago now, so it's really hard to remember exactly what was going through my mind. You probably remember the good side, like all these things. You remember the good times in the upsides. Probably just like sport, brain forgets about all the things that weren't quite so good because you wouldn't want to do it again. It was a fantastic ride, and it was by the skin of our teeth at times. But if you go back 20 years, you'd bet everything on it. And it's quite interesting now. You see that with youngsters, whereas now I'm old. But go back to sort of in the 30s. House, everything, everything's lumped in. It's like it's quite fascinating. Just as still taking risks, and actually in some ways the risks are actually bigger in absolute terms, but not in material terms to me. If somebody said, right, you've got to put everything back on red again, it would be unlikely to happen at this stage. But we had a great little team. I remember, we worked right through weekends and all sorts at times, just this, just to make sure we delivered an exceptional service to all of these installers. And, we just had huge customer loyalty, which is fantastic.
So at that time, were you inblyth by that time?
No, we were still in the back of Back Glen Street, and we did take on a couple of other properties in Hebburn. So yeah, we were spread around a number of quite small units around Hebburn at the time.
And I mean, how did you get your staff to raise their game? What you just said there sounds very complicated to me, but I'm sure it's, in your world, it's straightforward. But where does all of that experience and the technical side of it, where did that come from in the people that were in your team? Were you buying talent in, or what?
Well, one of the key moves in the whole thing was there was one other lady in the country who understood what was going on in the marketplace. And I was chatting to the mentor I mentioned earlier, David Lane, and said, look, yeah, Ruth understands what's going on. I didn't have much time for a boss. It was a really odd relationship because she was a customer as well as a competitor, because we were too small at the time to supply BT direct. So we had to go through this third party. And so I was chatting to David in Leeds and said, look, I need to give Ruth enough that she doesn't get into trouble, from a boss, because I've gotten very well with Ruth. But we want, obviously, clearly a huge opportunity for ourselves, for Tharsus. And David just said, well, employer. Right? That hadn't crossed my mind, So Ruth was based in Birmingham, so we met up in Motorway Services about a week later and on the M6 and said, do you fancy coming to work for us? And the rest was history. But bringing Ruth on board was key, because she was the other person in the country who really understood the market and had all the relationships and the technical understanding of the product. And so we built a team around the pair of us. And there's a few folk with us today still who worked really hard, and did a fantastic job.
Yeah. I mean, that's the key, isn't it? You're nothing without them.
Yeah, I say it to anybody who joins our business. We've got some nice buildings now, but in reality, we're a collection of 400 and something people. It's a team, and the business is the people. Yes, we have machinery and the like, but fundamentally, the only thing that differentiates us and makes us successful is attitude and capabilities of our colleagues and how we organise ourselves.
So when did you go into robotics then? Because that's the bit I remember from a tour that I did around your factory. And that just amazed me. So when did that all start? Was that after the BT thing?
We had a pretty awful time with the financial crash, sort of 2008-9, and we did go. We contracted heavily. We were in all of the wrong markets, including telecom. And then basically the robotics piece started in 2013 when we were approached to design a robot. And we had, if you look back on it, we had no right to play, but we had confidence in our ability. But I think that is the definition of an entrepreneur in a lot of ways, isn't it? It's somebody who will take on a challenge, commit to delivering something when you don't necessarily have the resources at your disposal in order to deliver that at the time. And
it's like madness, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so clearly we managed to convince a customer that we could do this. And again, that led to a lot of very interesting and challenging times. But we've learned a lot over the last 10 years. So if we look at the history of the robotics business, in 2008 we bought a business called Direct Message. I didn't really, there was two parts to it. There's a defense fabrication piece, which is quite close to our core business at the time, and there was an ad box business, which is outdoor advertising, illuminated ad boxes. We wanted the defence fab bit, but while we're in discussions around that, due to delays on a big London Underground contract for the advertising boxes, the business went into administration. So we ended up buying everything, and we set up a new business doing outdoor advertising, which is when we moved to our first site in Blyth.
Oh, that sounds completely different. That's a different sort of tack.
It wasn't intentional. It was a case of we wanted the defence fabrication bit, and it became all or nothing. So we decided, why not? There was a business there that had run out of cash. We had cash. it had what appeared to be a good product, and there was a decent sized order book there. But the problem was the orders were delayed due to planning permission issues. So on London Underground, so we set up this ad box business, but then that just became a catastrophically bad place to be by 2009-10. 2 years in, because the customers it's a very capital intense business. You invest in the infrastructure and then you recover monies over a period of years. The investment.
So you'd already been hit by the crash. Then you took on a business that subsequently wasn't really what you thought it was.
We bought the business just before the crash, probably about 6 months before it. Or not even 6 months before. It was November 97.
Right.
Sorry, November 2007. So literally just as the crash was starting, which I think, in hindsight, you think, well, why didn't you spot that? Well, with hindsight, there's a lot of things that we're very good at. So that business needed to be, in 2010-11, was only 11 people, about £1 million revenue, and it either needed to close it or reinvent it. So we reinvented it as a complex machine design and manufacture business, because of some of the skills we had in-house from designing and making these ad boxes for ourselves and others. And the learning never stops, even with some machines that seem quite simple. For example, in Germany, they don't actually control the way they wire up the positive and neutral spurs in a building, even though the plugs have positive and neutral terminals. They don't actually follow that. So therefore, we started shipping product for our customer to Germany, and it was working randomly. So for the last 10 years, there's been learning opportunities every month.
I like that. An opportunity. That's the focus, isn't it? Keep it to an opportunity and not a failure. So what about the robots then? Getting onto these robots, because obviously that's what you're into big time now. And how did it develop after that?
So it started in 2013 when we were fundamentally a plan B for Ocado and their new robots. After about 3 or 4 months, we became plan A because of the quality of the fundamental thinking. And we understand now that one thing that we're very good at is we've got a core team in the business who are very good at creating solutions. So that first got a technical problem, how are we going to solve it? Very good at thinking laterally, experimenting, coming up with quite wacky ideas. And so a lot of them fail, but we learn very quickly and we come up with something that works really well. You
must work closely with your customers on that then. They must heavily rely on you when they're putting everything into you.
Yeah, although we're generally saying, yes, we will deliver. So, yes, the customer is heavily reliant, but maybe they don't see, well, it's far more controlled these days, but they probably didn't see the chaos behind the scenes that then ensued. And, we're really good at that, coming up with the concepts and getting the early prototypes running. Since then, we've built out the capability, to take the product into detailed design, and then the transfer to production, and the production capabilities have all been transformed immeasurably over year on year over the last few years. But that was the start of it. And today we make more commercial robots than anyone else in the UK.
That's amazing.
And we're working with, last year, we worked with a couple of agri-tech companies, people like BMW, got Cambridge Medical Robotics now on board. And we were talking to others at the minute who hopefully over the next month or so we'll be adding to the list. But there isn't much expertise in there. If you've got a robotic device, you've got an idea for a robot, and you've developed it. A lot of the companies that are developing them generally will come from a software or one core element of the device, the machine, which is their competence. But everything that needs to sit around that idea, they don't have the skills to deliver. So that's where quite often we come in. So we're either doing some really fundamental design against the specification, or we're taking sort of early stage prototypes and the like from customers, and we're taking those through to like resolved, producible product. So that's where we see it.
Can you put that into some perspective for how we can visualize it? I mean, you say Ocado, people know, I think probably know what Ocado is, but what do you do for them? What's your bit?
So for Ocado, we manufacture the pick and place robots. And so they operate in swarms of up to about 3,000 robots on one site, and they're basically constantly sorting the product in bins within this a big warehouse. And I think I'd probably encourage people to go onto YouTube and have a look, because I can try and explain it, but a picture paints 1,000 words, and especially a video. And so these things move incredibly quickly, and they have incredibly tight passing tolerances. So when you watch it, it is quite impressive. Very impressive.
Definitely needed to Google that, because I've seen it in action. I've seen some of them in your factory, and it's just amazing how they get around and how they don't just stop. I'm sure they sometimes do fail, but it's that you need that perfection that you obviously get to, because the customer wouldn't put up with it if it didn't work, would they?
And I think like most devices, the devil's in the detail, So we've got really quite aggressive acceleration profiles, deceleration profiles, and then and you were operating on an aluminium grid, so you get into fundamentally developing traction control systems and braking systems and everything else that goes around that, and all the algorithms and that enable those things. So it is.
You've just lost me.
Right. Okay. Here we go back.
Right. Go back to the sort of fundamentals of robotics, though. How do people ever question, why you're making robots that are actually going to eventually take people's jobs for them? How do you defend yourself?
So as a business, we talk about strategic machines, and we don't take on customers or product that is purely looking to reduce labour. If it's just about a marginal cost saving, then that's just a productivity improvement. So robotics these days, generally, good robotic projects operate within a much bigger sort of service design envelope. So they're actually having a strategic impact on the customer service proposition. They're not just removing so many percentage points of labour or increasing efficiency. They're actually enabling new services to be created to improve customer service levels, which is giving our customer a competitive advantage. So if you look at the Ebitda system, the robot is one small element that sits in the middle of a really big, complex system of work.
And I mean, in recent times with the lockdowns and everything, people have been shopping that way, haven't they? And you must have never stopped during the pandemic.
So we're one of the lucky companies, and 2020 was a very good year for us. I think we saw about 40% increase in revenue. So it was a very positive year, and I think we've got a really strong reputation in the logistics market now, and we're seeing a lot of opportunities in that area, partly because of work we've done with Ebitda, but we're working with a number of other logistics businesses at the minute, looking at automating other areas of the that whole logistics infrastructure that we rely on so heavily now.
And with the just before we move off that kind of robotics, what skills do normal people need? What do they need to develop to keep ahead of the game, to maximize their opportunity with these machines? Because they don't want to lose their jobs. And I know you say it's not all about that, but do people need to sort of wise up a bit about what they should be doing in their lives of work?
That's really interesting. So we have quite a big schools outreach program. It's clearly struggling a bit with COVID at the minute, but there's lots of different opportunities. So we've got people assembling robots, testing them, but then we've got people writing software, we've got mathematicians writing algorithms, we've got all the design, electrical and mechanical, electronic design type functions and everything, and then all of the enablers of the material control and everything else. So what I would say is that the world's changing quickly. So I'm doing a job now completely different to what I was doing sort of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. And I think we all need to be adaptable. In 5 years' time, as a business, we'll be building machines that I haven't dreamt about and would be, just commercially completely unviable. But as a business, we're very lucky because we're operating in a sector which is going to grow heavily. But exactly what we'll be making in 5 years' time, we don't know. So I think a lot of it is about values. It's about, we talk about aim higher, think wider, work together. And those are the three values that the business is based on. The mission is around doing the right thing. So if people do the right thing, we gain the trust of our customers. We gain the trust of our colleagues. Our colleagues trust me and believe I will do the right thing. And, we work really hard with folk around the fact that, aiming higher is about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, about taking on challenges, exposing yourself to personal risk. Thinking wider, we've always got to explore the wider context because it's changing all the time. And working together, fairly obvious, all about that teamwork. So it's about having a good core education and ability to think, but then it's about the value, it's about behaviours and values after that.
So going back to Bump, which I mentioned in my introduction, did that just come out of the lockdown thing where you wanted to well, just tell me about it.
Okay, so that came out of first lockdown, late March last year. We were talking to people like Innovate UK, CBI, and saying, look, we need problem statements. There's loads of companies getting involved in the ventilator challenge. We didn't need it. And, if I was them, I would have gone to the F1 teams and people like that. So, as they did in the end. So they didn't need us getting involved there. But we weren't getting the problem statements from government. So we didn't want to just be a victim. I think, like, whether it's Brexit or COVID, as individuals and as a business, we want to be masters of our own destiny. It's up to us to deal with it, not have a victim mentality. So Bump came out of that. It was our way of fighting back against COVID, and really good project for the business.
Yeah, so just explain what it does.
So Bump is basically a social distancing device. It's a bit like electronic safety bubble. It's a Fitbit for safety. So if somebody comes into your 2 meter safe space, it will give a gentle warning, also warn the person who's encroaching on your space. So you'll get a single beep and the devices will flash blue, and that's just move away, please. At 1.2 meters, the things get quite aggravated. It'll beep continuously and flash red. So around that, we've built, so those are the devices. The devices are constantly monitoring, a bit like submarine sonar. They're constantly pinging the environment around them. And as they see a threat coming, they'll monitor it. As the threat gets close, then they'll warn you. And it really democratizes social distancing, because you might have a manager who's a bit overbearing and encroaching somebody a bit more junior's sort of personal space. You don't have to say anything, the device is doing that. The other thing, everybody has access to the data, so they can see how long and with whom they've bumped during the course of the day. And as a business, if we have a colleague test positive, within 30 seconds we know who they've been in contact with, of anybody. So now these days when we get a colleague testing positive, we don't have to wait. There's no secondary isolation, because people are very good at the social distancing behaviours, and we've got all of the data, so we know that people have been, they are safe. And also as a business, if we did have an outbreak, so say 5 or 6 colleagues suddenly all reported themselves as having been COVID positive, we can tell within a couple of minutes if that's a problem within the business and we need to take action, or if the business is a victim. And it's just a coincidence that 5 colleagues have tested positive at the same time. Maybe they've done something outside of work together. But what we are finding now is, we get our COVID stats every day come through on email, and this week we've had about 1 person with COVID and about 3 in sort of household isolation. And it shows that actually, as a business, because of the amount of effort we put in within the working environment, our colleagues are taking it really seriously and keeping themselves safe, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and as I take it, it's not just about your company. Have you passed this on, or this technology, or have you sold it to others?
Yeah, so we sold it to a range of other companies. So from quite large companies like the Smith and Nephews to some quite small local companies. It's approved for use in the NHS as well. So we're looking at sort of vaccination centres and the like, where it's really important that we keep people safe.
Yeah. And I mean, you must have had this on the go, because you couldn't have done it in 8 weeks. How did you do it in 8 weeks?
Well, it was probably about 3 months by the time we really got it out there. So going into this, we had the skills to deliver it. So if you look at we had the software and the data skills. One of our colleagues used to work for a business that did a lot of RF type tech applications.
What's that?
Radio frequency. So we're using Bluetooth and ultra wideband. Using two different types of radio frequency to monitor and communicate. So within the business, we had the skills, and also, I mean, one of the things that really I think a lot of people have learned from the pandemic is that if you collaborate with other companies well, if you've got a really clear purpose, you can collaborate. We had a team in New Zealand working on Bump as well. So our software folk would hand over at 8 o'clock at night to the team in New Zealand, in Hamilton, New Zealand, and then at 8 o'clock in the morning it would be handed back again. So we were working 24 hours a day on the software, and we dual streamed the hardware. We had two hardware streams running. So we were parallel. There's a lot of parallel activity. It clearly not the cheapest way to do it, but we de-risked the program as much as we possibly could.
I mean, it's got future application, that hasn't it? It's going to go further than that.
Yeah, hopefully, and for people like the NHS, they don't talk about COVID; they just talk about disease control, just disease control. So we are hopeful that there's a long tail to it. But as a business as well, we talk to our customers about this is what can be done and should be done, and it's a really good demonstration internally of what when we get the bit between our teeth as a team, this is what we can achieve. So from that perspective, I think it was fantastic experience and really good for the business. I think we've generated a lot of good publicity here. People like the London Marathon used it. We've got a Royal Academy of Engineering medal for pandemic services. So, really raised our profile significantly.
It's awful that, in a way, that, some people haven't managed to get anything out of COVID other than a disease. And yet others in many, many ways have, taken things on and kind of beat it that way, haven't we?
I've seen some fantastic examples of companies really adjusting their business models and changing what they do, and it'll be really interesting. I think the Wall Street Journal coined the K-shaped recovery, and I think there's those businesses that are doing really well post-COVID, and not always in areas that you'd expect, and those businesses are really struggling. So I think there's some great examples of companies that are really reinventing how they do things and challenging the norm and the status quo in their sectors, and doing things that, to be honest, from the outside looking in, you think, wow, I wouldn't have thought you could do that. So I think there is opportunity at the minute, although it is incredibly challenging in a lot of ways. So
I'm almost frightened to ask you this question because I don't know whether you can answer it. What's the face of the business going to be in 15 or 20 years' time? Can you even imagine it?
We're building out a plan for the next 5 years. We've got really clear objectives. So we want to triple revenue, which sounds like a big target, but it is achievable because we're fortunate that we've got a market that's growing by double-digit percentages year on year. So the market's growing and we are well positioned in it. So we should do well. There's a lot of big companies that we're talking to who are realizing because of the pandemic, they need to change faster than they were. So the huge environmental agenda. If you look around electric vehicles, energy, and just how we provide services. So we see there's a lot of new and exciting tech application opportunities coming through. We're also developing, Bump as our own product, but we've also got another product in development, which we've got the first customer on board for, and others lining up for it. So, and that will be a real game changer because it moves us up the ladder into a position of actually, looking at the software stack that's above the swarm of robots we're looking at and providing the control systems and the like as well. So, it's really exciting, and we're really determined that we're creating a tech business that's in the Northeast for the long term. And as an extended leadership team, that's what motivates us. We want to, there's a little bit of the northern underdog. We want to show what we can do and make sure that we do it in a way that it's got longevity in the region.
It's great. You see that Bump gave you even higher profile, and it's fantastic for the Northeast. A little place called Blyth is definitely on the map, isn't it?
It is, and I think, again, year on year, it's just that evolution. We work with some very good people in London around PR and the like now, so we invest a heck of a lot more money in that area. One of the things we did last year was a guy called Andrew Nicholson, Virgin Money's brand director, joined us as our group marketing director. And, for an engineering company based in Blyth to have somebody of that sort of capability and profile, we really want to be the best, and we're constantly investing ahead of time. And yes, we could make more money in the short term. We could improve our Ebitda, but we're still building for the future.
And as an entrepreneur, that's the boring bit, isn't it? The Ebitda.
Well, I wouldn't call it boring. I think having cash in the bank when something like COVID hits is very useful. Because, the fact that we could have closed the doors and survived for a year meant that we could still be on the front foot and develop bump. And so we manage costs aggressively, but we're still investing, if that makes sense. And you can only do that if you've got really good financial management. And we've got fantastic CFO. Yeah.
So you obviously used David Lane, who I heard. Well, we dealt with him very many years ago. In his time, was a mentor, wasn't he? So he helped you along in the business and just maybe give you a bit of confidence, if nothing else. Who do you follow in the way of other entrepreneurs?
So for me personally, mentors have been hugely important. The world's changed slightly now, so I've got a very good chairman who's incredibly successful guy. In December, we took on a guy called Martin McCourt as a non-executive director. And Martin's the guy who built Dyson for James Dyson.
Wow.
So he took Dyson from being a couple of hundred employees through to a few thousand, and he internationalized the business. So having Martin on your board is really interesting. So that really opens you up to a new level of challenge. So talk about putting yourself beyond your comfort zone. David was recently chairman of Shepherd Group, who own people like Porter Cabin, and he's done some phenomenal things in his time. And Martin, again, incredibly capable guy. So by surrounding yourself with people like that, I suppose they are in reality my mentors now.
Yeah, and that comes on to your tip of the week. Would you say a good tip is to have people like that at that level to look at different things for you?
I've always encouraged you to expose yourself to people who are better than you, which isn't difficult in my case, but you've got to find people who are really going to challenge you and make you feel uncomfortable and not just tell you that you're great. So you can learn so much from them. And occasionally it's just really small tips. That conversation I had with David Lane, and it was, this is my problem. And I was like, well, just hire Ruth. And, I hadn't made that leap, but that simple little comment was all I needed. And sometimes, you get different things from mentors. Sometimes it's simple little one-liners that can have a huge impact, or, sometimes it's slower burn sort of assistance with structural thinking and how you organize the business. So, I really encourage people to try and find a good mentor, somebody that works with you. Clearly, you've got to have the right chemistry, but they can be really absolutely transformational.
And it gives you support as well sometimes, isn't it?
You do need a safe place, so you do need people who you can be honest with at times. When you're really not very sure, you've got to be able to talk to somebody who understands a bit about where you're at, I think, because clearly you can't show that in the business. However much you may feel it at times, within the business, you kind of let on that you're nervous.
That's a good point.
And one of the other big lessons is that it doesn't actually change. You think you've learned the lessons, you think how things work, and things feel like they're stabilizing. Then, the next door opens and you realize it's just new challenges and new threats. And I always remember talking on a Zoom meeting with a guy called Lou Frankfort, who built Coach, so customer. So Coach, a leather goods company. So he went on a huge journey with them from 100 million or so of revenue up to the 2 billion mark, and he sold when he was chief exec. And he said, I was still running scared at 2 billion of revenue. And you're thinking, crikey, okay, this never is going to change. You realize at that point, when you've got this guy telling you that, yes, I was still running scared then. You think it never changes, you know, because the market's shifting, you know, and you might be at the top of your game, but you know, you just got to look at some of the retail winners and losers at the minute, you know, companies that you never thought would be under threat or struggle are suddenly really struggling.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, Brian. Thank you for that. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Okay, good to speak to you, Brian.